Starting off, we have a romantic Christmas comedy starring Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet, The Holiday. It is a fun little romantic comedy about two women, one from America, one from England, who both decide to live in each other's houses for a while during Christmas time, and naturally they both get into each other's skins. We have Cameron Diaz, who goes into England, lives in a nice big fancy house, and gets along with British Jude Law, who they share a nice British romance with, while Kate Winslet spends time in America, where she meets Jack Black and enjoys the American lifestyle of romance. The movie definitely does go for some creative ideas. I do like sort of the gimmick it is. It's, about sort of American living through a British romance and Britain living through a American romance. It's a sort of fun little cross counter situation. And it is fun seeing the ways it goes. Well, it does fall through that situation that many rom coms do, where it has the whole argue situation, all that. It does still work in its ways. Overall, The Holiday is a fun Christmas rom com that definitely is enjoyable to watch. If you do like rom coms, then you should enjoy this movie. But now here's one that I did not enjoy. Just Friends, starring young Ryan Reynolds, is the story of a man who has to spend his life dealing with one of the hardest things any dude has to deal with when it comes to romance: the goddamn friend zone. That's what this movie's about. It's about a guy who spends his entire teenage life suffering for the fact that a girl he has a big crush on only thinks of him as a friend. During lifestyle, he never gets to it. As he grows older, he starts to continue to think about it and still wants to try and get out of that zone as much as he can. So what's the problem with this movie? Well, my biggest issue is just how poorly spirited it is. Like, I know the whole idea of being stuck in the friend zone is supposed to feel uncomfortable. That's sort of what the gimmick is. But the movie just, it doesn't go over it in ways that makes it fun. Like, the comedy-wise, it's just not that exciting, nothing fun. And most of the movie is just this guy getting bullied. Like, it's mostly just him trying to get her love, and it mostly ends in situations that just make you feel like, God damn it, I do not like watching this. I just do not like the way seeing how much time he gets abused in this movie, whether physically or mentally. It just kind of gets annoying to sit through. And for how much time we have to spend through it, spend the whole movie, it just, it comes off as really uncomfortable and unsettling, which, again, I get it's supposed to be the idea. It's a rom-com about the friend zone, but I don't know. I just feel like it's just not very fun to watch this one guy get bullied a lot. It doesn't really do much for the story. One thing I will say did work fun is Anna Faris in the movie. Yeah, she appears in this movie as some sort of Britney Spears like, where she's a famous star that Ryan Reynolds ends up dating for a bit, and I gotta admit, her crazy attitude in this movie does sort of make up for some of the problems, but still, the movie still lacks as fun and enjoyable. It just comes off as unamusing, and I know, maybe I'm just thinking it the wrong way, but I really cannot enjoy too much sitting through it. Alright, enough of the rom-coms. Running Scared, this cop comedy from the 80s starring Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines, is an interesting little story about two guys who decide to take a break from their usual city police chiefs and move into another city where they essentially try to walk into shoes into another type. Yeah, it's another one of those going to another city type movies, and granted, I can't say that's too dumb of an idea. I mean, even if it does seem like it's going to be cliche, they actually do get some fun out of it. You get to see sort of what these guys have going for. They're two buddies who basically have to spend time in another city and essentially do different things with each other. It's sort of like a Rush Hour / Lethal Weapon type of movie, and this came out around the time when Lethal Weapon was a pretty popular buddy cop film, so I like to imagine this movie took some inspiration from it. Like, did it come out first? I'm pretty sure this came out a little bit after Lethal Weapon. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, Lethal Weapon came out first, and then this movie was trying to kind of take some inspiration from it, because you can see some of it from the movie. For the most part, it is fun, it's just fun, so the comedy does work good. I will admit, I was pretty impressed with how many good funny moments there were between these two. I mean, Billy Crystal is pretty funny. Overall, it's a fun little cop film. If you're into buddy cop movies, then this definitely should be on your list. Rambo. After years of knowing Rambo and how popular the franchise was, I've only now gotten into it. And now I've watched the first one, First Blood. this story of a man who suffered a lot of traumatizing moments during his time as a warrior. So naturally, when he returns back to try to reunite with his pals, he gets stuck in situations where he just feels too resilient and too traumatized to him becoming a completely over the top man in front of these people. First Blood sort of takes you on a weird journey with this guy. What's his, sort of mental state, and the whole movie is just him running away from police because he's too scared, and he's basically just keeping him getting too focused on what he's done for a while of his life. Overall, the movie is still pretty great. Sylvester Stallone is definitely a great actor. I was impressed with how well he can do action, as of course I was mostly used to his dramatic role in Rocky and whatnot. But this movie kind of shows that he also works pretty well when he's an action star. So yeah, Sylvester Stallone shows his action roots in this film, and I'm sure the sequel should show it off as well. I'm aware not every sequel was well received, but I still kind of do want to check them out just to see what I think. So yeah, First Blood, it was a great movie, and because I enjoyed it a lot, I definitely will look forward to watching the sequels, because even if they are going to be inferior or whatever, I still want to see what more of his character has, because this movie did prove he is pretty fun to watch. Alright, so here we have some good gangster stuff going on. American Gangster is a drama about, sort of the gangster life between African American culture. It's basically Goodfellas, except it's with black people. And now, I'm not trying to sound racist when I say that, but the movie does work well when it does tell its sort of gimmick story, because the story is pretty dramatic. It's these gangsters who pretty much live a different lifestyle, or essentially trying to get away with their culture and being as gangster as they can be. I really am trying to use other words other than gangster, but when I'm talking about these movies, that's kind of the only word I can ever think of. Because again, the movie does sort of feel like a black version of Goodfellas, and that's not a complaint because Goodfellas had a great writing story to it, and there are a lot of things you can do with that story to make it unique. And I gotta applaud, this movie did do that. It did find unique ways to give this story well. I think the best praise I give for this movie is how much of a good performance the actors are. I mean, this is another one of Denzel Washington's best well roles, so I can definitely say this is probably one of the best I've seen of him. And the other actors did pretty good too. It is interesting, sort of what they do with the idea. They take sort of the whole gangster idea that a lot of movies achieved with, and sort of try and mix it in with the white guilt thing that made a lot of movies successful. That's kind of the best way I can describe this movie. A mix between the successful gangster movies and the successful white guilt films. Both of those mixed together to make this story that's not amazing in my opinion, but still worthwhile. So now here we have another drama, Rainmaker. A little story about law school. We have Matt Damon along with Danny DeVito, who both joined together for this story about going through law school, trying to accomplish the best things, and pretty much getting used to the stuff that's wrong and right about the justice system. That's kind of the best way you can describe the Rainmaker. Sort of a small dramatic satire on how the justice system is and how law school pretty much settles itself, because you have Matt Damon, who's the new guy, the guy who's learning all the ways he can achieve becoming a lawyer. And then you have Danny DeVito, who supposedly takes him under his wing and shows him what's good about the justice system and all the things that are wrong with it. He kind of plays that role in this movie, the guy who basically knows all the cons with the system and pretty much shows him what it takes to be a good lawyer and what it takes to be a well understanding lawyer. And it is fun to see these interactions. This is definitely an interesting pairing. Danny DeVito is one of those actors that you mostly can be hard to pair when it comes to finding someone who can copy his comedic skills. I mean, the closest we've seen was him and Arnold Schwarzenegger in a couple of movies, but even then, it was still with weird pairing. So yeah, Danny DeVito is one of those actors who, again, you definitely, it can be hard to find someone he can connect with, but every time he does appear in something with other people, while he doesn't have the similar assets, he does make for a great idea, as he pretty much makes the movie much better to watch because of how he is, but compared to how the other person is. And I think The Rainmaker is one of those good examples of him not being able to have a similar mindset, but have a mindset of his own that makes a pairing work so much better. Nicolas Cage. He's had its great movies, he's had its good movies, he's had its not so good movies. Here is one of his fine films, Lord of War, the story of a man who has such a fascination with weaponry and gunfare. That's kind of what the movie is, about a man who seems to have lots of obsession over guns and weapons, and someone who essentially wants to try and make weaponry much more strong than it already is. I think the best way to describe this movie is battle and war and guns, is what Nicolas Cage likes. He likes guns. That's what you can say about this movie. Nicolas Cage likes guns. I think the movie does work when it comes to, trying to make Nicolas Cage feel dramatic. There's been times where his dramatic acting works great, but when it mostly comes from what the story is. This is one of those cases where his dramatic acting is put into a story that on paper seems ridiculous, but Cage tries as much as he can to be as serious of an actor as he can to make the story work. And I will admit, it definitely doesn't pull it off terribly. He does a pretty decent job at making such a weird idea actually be kind of interesting, because, the idea of someone who really wants to make gun use more official is, quite frankly, something interesting. But Nicolas Cage does what he does to make the story more fun to watch, and true, he doesn't help make the movie great. It still is kind of stupid at times, but for the most part, I did at least get more out of this movie. I do think Cage did do a fine job at, kind of trying to get me hooked enough to where I can take it seriously. So it wasn't amazing. He definitely didn't make it great, but, I think, there's something that can't be found with this kind of movie. Black Christmas, a horror film set around Christmas time. I believe that when this came out, that was a huge idea. A horror movie set around Christmas. I'm sure that was something that many people thought seemed unreal, because, Christmas is such a joy holiday, and yet people never would have associated it with horror. But naturally, Black Christmas proved that it can be a horror film. So here we have Black Christmas, the story of a killer around Christmas time, and basically that's what it is. Yeah, it's basically like Halloween, except it's set around Christmas. And funny, this came out first before Halloween, so we can definitely say it probably set the bar high for horror movies set on certain holidays. And again, it's probably very interesting to have a horror movie set and mostly focused around Christmas. I'm sure that probably meant something to a lot of people. Or maybe it's just, maybe it wasn't that common. But to me, at least, this definitely seemed like such a crazy thing for the time. And nowadays, we see a lot of horror movies set around different times. But I'm sure back then there could have been some crazy controversy surrounding it. I don't know, I could be wrong, but still, Black Christmas is scary enough. It's not as scary as other Christmas horror films. It definitely doesn't set the bar high enough. But it does go well enough for me to say it's at least alright, And because, there are the kills, there is the scariness, there is maturity, but I feel like maybe it didn't go high enough to make this, as exciting as it could be. I don't know, I'm just saying, this could have been a little more exciting, but still, I got some amusement out of it. So if you're interested in seeing a horror movie focused around Christmas, then you definitely should enjoy this film. But just people like me who are just mostly going to see this to expect a lot of horror, then it's probably not going to get you everything you want, but you should still be invested with it. Good old governmental films. Olympus Has Fallen. What is this movie about? It's about the White House being destroyed and made as a hostage situation. Yeah, that's what we got in this movie. We got a movie involving a historical landmark being destroyed and then being kept as a lot of people under hostage. It's basically one of those terrorist American movies that try to show the dangers America can have. But at the same time, this is kind of just one of those films that kind of over-exaggerates what terrorist organizations can be like with America. It kind of shows how dark it is to us because, yeah, these kind of situations can happen in real life. We have been proven that our American country has had a lot of problems with other countries where situations like this, while they haven't happened, they definitely seem like something that could work as a well prediction. So if there ever does come a time where something like this does sort of occur, then this movie is going to definitely become something. But still, overall, the movie, it is fun, I mean, you got Morgan Freeman, who always likes to make movies as serious as ever, but then you also have sort of this whole idea surrounding with other actors, and I think Morgan Freeman might be the most memorable thing in this movie because, he's a pretty big actor. Everyone else in this movie kind of just falls under being good, but I think really the best of this movie comes from all the destruction we see and sort of all the matureness there is with it, because I do like those movies that kind of show the president and the government as sort of a heroic asset, because there are a lot of movies that want to make fun of the government system and say that, the government has its problems. But this movie kind of shows that, they are heroes when they can be. Even if we got people like Donald Trump or George W. Bush in our hands, there is some heroism that you can find in the government. So even if these presidents just don't have it all right, we can't say they're villains because that's kind of taking a stretch. Our system is not a villain. Movies like this show that there is something that they can do to be heroes. They just probably don't want to do it right now. Oh, look, another Christmas horror movie. Funny enough, I actually enjoyed this one a little more than Black Christmas. Now, not in terms of being scarier. No, it is not scarier, but it is more fun. Santa's Sleigh is just as silly of a Christmas horror comedy as you get. It's the story of Santa Claus as a killer. Now you might be wondering how are they going to execute that? Is it just going to be like sort of just show Santa being like, hey, I'm a killer and that's it? Well, they do actually. I will give this movie credit. It does give Santa as a killer an origin story. And I gotta say, that's actually kind of fun. This movie says that Santa lost a bet with an angel and to where he had to be joyous and be happy to all kids throughout time. And when the bet ended, he then decided to go ahead and start killing people because he was so upset with how much he had to deal with. It's honestly, I'm kind of impressed that they were able to come up with some backstory. Like, I feel like this movie could have very easily have just started with Santa's killing people and not give any backstory. Just be like, Santa's a killer now. But they do kind of try and execute him up. And granted, yes, it is still a stupid idea, but come on, they know it is. I'm sorry, but this movie did have moments that I actually found funny. Not even the ironic moments. No, times when the movie was trying to intentionally be funny, I actually was well with. So I'm gonna give this movie the credit where it's due. It's still not a great movie, okay? Because they do take it on a ridiculous level at times where I feel like they really didn't need to go that far, but still, I still had fun with the times that this movie did achieve at telling a joke or being frightening because, again, this is not scarier than other horror movies like Black Christmas, not at all, but in terms of the ones I watched this year, this one probably might have gotten the most fun, I would say. So, I'll be honest, I think this movie deserves more credit. So, with a title like Mermaids, you're probably expecting this to be a movie about, I don't know, a woman played by Cher who's a mermaid and gets caught in an American romance with a bunch of, if you look for the poster, you might see that the movie's about a mermaid who sees a family and gets acquainted with it. That must be what the movie is, right? Well, it turns out Mermaids is not about it at all. No. This movie's about a single mother who has two kids, one who's a young Christina Ricci, who's just all nice and innocent, and the other is Winona Ryder, who does not enjoy herself, hates all the stuff going around the world, and just wants to run away or whatever. Yeah, Mermaids is barely a thing in this movie. Why is it called Mermaids? Well, aside from there being one scene where they all dress up for New Year's and Cher dresses up as a mermaid, I don't know. I feel like they're trying to sort of say some sort of metaphor with him. I don't know, but there has to be a reason they decided, like, maybe the whole idea of her dressing up as a mermaid sort of represents the message of the movie that I just don't get. I don't know. Maybe. Either way, let's just talk about what the movie is outside of that stupid title. Mermaids is a fine story, You got a lot of good stuff to it. You got Cher and Bob Hoskins, who work as the romance couple in the movie, where she meets him at one point and they basically get their ways. It's basically just another one of those single mother looking for new people kind of movies. And this time we get it with a bunch of different ideas. So I mostly I think my best joy from this movie came from the performance of Winona Ryder and Bob Hoskins. Those two were the best part of the movie. Cher isn't terrible. It's just, she didn't have enough to it to make her the highlight. The highlight mostly came from some of the supporting actors. I think they were the ones that gave this movie a more passing grade to me. Overall, while I do think calling it Mermaids was a little off-putting, it is still a fun little romantic drama, one that does have some good style and ideas, and I think one that really would hit well for those who can relate to having single parents. If you're one of those kids who has dealt with a single parent issue before, then you might find some joy out of this movie. Okay, so The Bone Collector. The Bone Collector is a story about, it's another Denzel Washington film. This one's an action movie involving action. I'm gonna be honest, after watching all these other movies, I kind of need to reprocess myself what this movie is about. I got it, yeah. It's about them searching this guy who's been hunting down bones around the body. He's basically been digging up different bones, and he's basically a wanted fugitive for that reason. It's them chasing someone who's doing some grave digging. Maybe, I probably am saying it the wrong way, but out of all the movies I watched this month, this is one of those that I mostly remember for sort of different reasons. My remembrance of this movie mostly comes from how Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie were. They were sort of our main characters in the movie. We got the female lead who, basically does more than you expect. And of course you got Denzel Washington, who shows up to try and make the role as dramatic as he can. And those are what assets I remember of the movie. The rest I recall something about a fugitive who's taking pictures of lost skeletons and basically doing illegal shit with them. Something like that, maybe if I need to analyze this movie better, I would watch it again. But for now, I can say it was still a good action film. It did have a unique idea to it, so I'll give it that. Action movies that do try something unique, I will give enough passing for. Just for the most part, when it comes to remembering every single detail, I'm not really able to do it. Here we have yet another Christmas horror comedy. This one is very infamous. We all know about it. Silent Night, Deadly Night. The classic story about a man who had a traumatizing experience with a Santa Claus. So as he got older, he became acquainted with the Santa Claus suit and just became a murderer with it. And that's what the movie is. It's the guy who lived a traumatizing childhood, and so he dresses up as Santa Claus and murders people in it. It's not a good movie, honestly. Its idea is fine, but there's silliness around it. I gotta admit, I think what I really didn't like about the movie was more so how poorly executed they handle it. Because the idea of someone who becomes a killer for a Santa Claus suit due to a tragic passing is, it could have made for something that worked better. But this movie, handles itself as silly and unnecessary as it can. So, yeah, it just comes off as, wow, it's not a good movie. I can't really say too much else about it other than it's silly. It's, not really eventful. There's not enough to make it scary. It just comes off as, too stupid and unfounded. But, we all know about that for now. And of course, we all know how ridiculous and even more stupid the second film is. Trust me. Next Christmas, I'm definitely checking that one out. I wasn't able to check it out this Christmas, but next Christmas, I am definitely going to give it a watch because, believe me, as unamusing as this movie was, it's still made for something ridiculous. So I think the second film could achieve more to it. It won't be a good movie, but it should be an enjoyable one. Alright, so now we're outside of Christmas. Let's look at some other films. Here we have We're the Millers, a 2010 comedy about this drug dealer who has to smuggle drugs across the border and decides the best way to do it is to disguise a family. Get some random people to make a family out of. So he gets Jennifer Aniston as a stripper, he gets a random 18-year-old virgin, and some runaway chick who is gothic, I guess, or whatever. And we get this comedy where they basically have to act like a family and, try to do the best they can to smuggle weed and get away with it. And like most comedies with the whole wanting to get away with it idea, you got the thing where, they they have to pretend doing it, but as it goes on, they start getting very enjoyed with their gimmick, so they get more into it. That's what it is, it's one of those, getting used to the why kind of comedies. I don't know if you're aware of the gimmick, but I've seen other comedies that do that, that sort of show off something where a character has to do some sort of lie to get accomplish something, and as the film progresses, they start getting so used to the lie that they start feeling like maybe it shouldn't be a lie anymore. And yeah, naturally, that's what this movie does. They start have to pretend they're a family, then they feel like they really work well as a family. Overall, it does have its funny moments or whatnot. My biggest issue with the movie, however, is it's way too long. It's less than 2 hours, which is usually not too bad for a comedy, in my opinion. But this movie just dragged on too long for moments. There are many moments in this movie that just weren't necessary, didn't really do much to achieve, and I feel like just kind of added too much drama that wasn't needed. It's another thing I kind of have problem with most modern comedies, adding unnecessary drama. This movie falls victim to that, with moments that we're supposed to feel bad for, but I don't. I'm expecting a comedy to have a cohesive story and not try to get us to feel for it, because this is one of those things that you really do not need to be expecting so many people to relate to. It's a silly idea that they're kind of trying to make feel relatable, and I don't have it. So that's just kind of the big problem with it. Overall, though, the rest of the movie still works fine. It's a decent comedy, just not one that I liked enough due to how long it. Maybe if it was shorter, maybe if they cut out some of those pointless drama moments, then it could have been a little better. Still, I'll give it whatever. So, if you remember my review of 300, you remember me saying I didn't like it. I did not like the style that 300 had. Well, I knew it was supposed to be a different kind of style with a comic vibe. I always felt it felt more like just an excuse to not have try as hard with the effects. I feel like the visionary style that 300 had made it look more like it was just their excuse of not trying to be convincing. And Watchmen falls under that category too. This movie, however, I feel kind of executed the problem in a worse way for being much longer. While I still think 300 was dumber and a little worse, Watchmen is a lot longer, and because of how long the movie is, it kind of makes its stylized visuals just feel even more off-putting. And I feel that Zack Snyder, yes, Zack Snyder made this movie, of course. I feel like he just didn't really give this movie enough plan to make the whole visionary idea that he put into the movie really convincing. I mean, I know every time there's supposed to be some action scene or big effect, it just looks bland. It does not look good. And I feel like I can't say that because you're gonna be like, oh, well, that's the gimmick. That's what it's supposed to look like. That. That's just kind of why I think that this is just his excuse of not trying hard. It's just his way of saying, screw it. I'll do what I want with it. I can give this comic book style, so anytime I make an effect, it doesn't have to look convincing because, that's what it is. It's a comic book thing. So, yeah, I'll be honest. I feel like it just didn't work well. It was too long, too confusing, too ugly, I have to say. That's my best way to describe it, ugly. This movie was kind of ugly.